Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail. Today we're going to share demon encounter horror stories. First story. I wrote a demon to punish them all. I think I'm next. Look, laugh all you want. I get it. This sounds like some unhinged Tumblr era. I cursed my ex, and now my walls are bleeding fanfic crap. Trust me, when I started this, it was exactly that. Just another joke, or say, what was meant to be copium. It was petty witchcraft. Call it revenge journaling. A wicked coping mechanism that was masqueraded as creativity. I invented a vengeful demon called Asarath. Why? Well, because therapy was expensive, hate was free. And I had an oddly imaginative brain with many ideas that spoke for me. For me, it was just another extension of my psyche, my darkest thoughts and desires. So I made lore. I drew its sigils. I wrote curses and hexes like poetry, each one tailored to the assholes that walked on me. It made me feel powerful in a life where I wasn't. It was only meant to hear me through written words. Now I'm afraid it's beginning to hear the curses I mutter under my breath. And it's not fun anymore. It started with Jeff, my neighbor, a retired meathead with a beer gut and a truck he couldn't park straight to save his life. He started off annoying, late music, passive-aggressive lawn wars. Then he escalated, called me names to my face and behind my back, deliberately backed into my fence. One time, I saw him smirk as he bumped my mailbox out of alignment with his bumper. I was angry, like not confrontational angry, just coiled. One morning, we got into an argument after I confronted him about his increasingly hostile behavior towards me and my property. I won't go into details, but it got nasty real quick. He threatened to jump me, and well, I backed off as I muttered, "I hope you burn alive, scum." That night, mid-dinner, my TV routine was interrupted by unnatural, horrid screaming outside, and so I looked out the window. I don't even know how I heard it in the first place. Jeff was stumbling out of his truck. His skin was already lit. No explosion, no visible fire source. Just flame swallowing him whole. He burned like a phoenix made of gasoline. His screams weren't his. They were layered, like hundreds of throats screaming in dissonant harmony, a choir of the damned, burning in some unseen hell. The fire report said he'd spilled gasoline somehow. A tragic accident, right? I told myself it was coincidence. Horrific timing. Then there was his coworker, Kian. Smiled in meetings, stole my project proposal, pitched it word for word to our VP. He got a raise, and I got reprimanded. I didn't say anything that time. I did confront him, but it was futile. Trying to claim he stole my work wouldn't work either, because everybody was all laurels for him. Great. It was only after a few hours I came to know he fell down from a flight of stairs in the stairwell and broke his right arm. I didn't remember cursing him at all. Bad luck, maybe? Not quite. I opened my notebook one evening as I got home, just as I surfed through Asarath's lore. Something I didn't remember writing was filled on one of the empty pages in a handwriting that resembled mine. Vengeance requires no permission, only invocation and ideation. I flipped a few more pages and found new entries. New lore, things I never wrote. Paragraphs detailing Asarath's ideation phase. One line read, "Subtle indications of Asarath harboring a vessel's body include the blackening of the throat. Many successful conjurers rejoice this moment as the onset of the great unification of wrath and man." Yeah, I don't remember writing any of this. Could have been me, but it was still something I couldn't really place. Later that night, I woke up close to 4 a.m. to an itchy, dry throat. I started coughing violently, deep, body-shaking hacks that left me winded. My throat itched too long, and I couldn't really catch any sleep as I found myself coughing almost every minute or so. When I got up next morning and looked in the mirror, there was a dark mark across the base of my neck. I scraped at it. Nothing came off. It wasn't on the surface. It was in me. That night onwards, I stopped sleeping well. Every morning, new marks. Faint bruising. My skin started looking like it was dusted with ash. My limbs felt weak. More pages appeared. This time, a drawing of a body standing upright mid-flame, with Asarath standing behind it, all teeth and jagged silhouette, whispering into its ear. The lore had changed. Now another edition said, "The more unwilling the conjurer, the more complete is the possession. Fire resists what it cannot consume." I panicked. Something was wrong. New entries, statements, how on earth did they just begin to appear? So I locked the notebook in a cardboard box, wrapped in a pillowcase, and then threw it in my closet. I tried to forget it. For a while, it stayed quiet. Until that afternoon. I was driving home from the store, just cruising, half distracted, until this helmetless jackass clipped my bumper on a turn, nearly sending me into a street pole. As he passed, he flipped me off. What a jerk. Reflexively, almost stupidly, I muttered under my breath, "Hope that dick gets what he deserves." I didn't mean it. I didn't feel it. Yes, it just slipped out. I kept driving, shaken but intact. As I approached the four-way crossing, I saw something, just a flicker in the corner of my eye. By the footpath, half shielded by a tree, stood a man. Naked, ashen gray, like coal smeared all over his body. Grinning he was, with a mouth far too wide, eyes cold gray and affixed to my face. Not shocked, not hostile, just watching expectant. I swerved again, instinctively. Tires screeched. My heart slammed into my ribs. And when my eyes snapped back to the road, and there he was, the biker, or what was left of him, twisted under the front of a freight truck that hadn't even braked. I barely missed the pileup myself. My brain short-circuited behind the wheel. He was just ahead of me seconds ago. How the hell did he end up? I didn't wait to process it. I just drove back. Home felt wrong the second I opened the door. There was a smell, charcoal, acrid and rotten, thick in the air. The closet door in my room? It was wide open. The box? Ripped apart, its pillowcase shredded. The scripts were everywhere on the floor and in the room. Scattered across the carpet, pinned to the mirror, stuck to the walls like someone or something had been going through them. And in the center of it all, my notebook. Open, waiting. On it was scribbled an image I didn't draw. Asarath sat upon a pile of hundreds of corpses as they burned away, its face large with a grin and eyes depicted joyous. It sat upon them like a throne made of the damned, as if it was feeding off their souls and their suffering if they could feel pain. I didn't flip any more pages. I didn't need to. I knew just what I had to do. Fight fire with fire. I grabbed the scripts, the notebook, everything, and walked straight to the living room. I cleaned out the fireplace just for this, to purify this cursed artifact. The fire caught really fast, but it didn't stay ordinary. The flames slowly curled upwards, then outwards, shaping themselves like something tall, wrong, and hunched, like someone standing inside it. There was no smoke, just the heat, flames flicking off its edges. Then, just as sudden as it had appeared, the fiery outline was gone. The flames died off with unnatural silence, like something resting forcefully. I stood there numb, in the silence of the room, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. I haven't written anything since, and I won't. For weeks now, it has been quiet. I came to think that I had purged its presence and any residuals that I may have claimed. Cursing others, thankfully, that no longer works. Sleep is better. The marks haven't gone away, but, well, I'm not coughing my lungs out of my body. Just last night, though, I woke up to that familiar acrid scent I still remember from the day I burned the lore. In one corner of the room, just by the lamp near my closet, I spotted a Silhout, the Ashen Man. He didn't move, nor did he speak. He just stood there grinning, face half masked by the lamp's head, eyes stark black and white, and staring into my soul. He vanished the moment I blinked. The lamp briefly flickered to dim light in the darkness. I really don't know what that thing was, but I think I gave it something worse than a form. I gave a name. Second story. A demon offered me a strange deal. Should I take it? I first heard of it when my friend Kylie mentioned seeing some roadkill outside. We work at a food bank in a very metropolitan area, so the idea of a wild animal being here piqued my interest. She hadn't given any details about species or condition, which I interpreted as meaning it was injured beyond recognition, and she didn't want to analyze the site. I've always had a bit of a dark side, I guess. A few hours passed without event, unless you count moving boxes and taking inventory. With my lunch break coming up, I remembered Kylie's roadkill. I had meant to investigate it earlier, but I had forgotten it once I got to work. With it fresh in my mind, I grabbed my lunch bag and headed out a side entrance to see the poor guy myself. Have you seen ferrofluid? It's basically a bunch of super tiny magnets suspended in black liquid. It reacts to strong magnets by creating spikes and ripples that constantly shift and change when the magnet moves, but it all freezes when the magnet is still. That's what the roadkill looked like. Spiky, dark, and indecisive. Sometimes the spikes were straight and still, or curved and shifting. One part would look like a hedgehog, and another would look like a hand reaching out from the ground. No matter what shape it took, it was always shiny, black, and the size of a large house cat. I stood there staring at the thing for, well, I don't know how long. It could have been 20 minutes or 20 seconds. I wouldn't have noticed. I was too focused on this impossible thing. Green fingers emerged from the darkness. A hand, an arm, a long arm, long, reaching out for me. 15, maybe 20 feet long. The open palm stopped in front of me. Just like the darkness, the hand was extremely shiny. White highlights caused by the reflections revealed the palm was smooth, the fingers had no creases, and there was no sign of fingernails. It was completely out of this world. The fingers curled and released a few times in quick succession, like it wanted me to do something. I raised my empty left hand to the green hand, nearly touching it. I stopped when I realized that it had 2 thumbs. 5 total fingers, 2 thumbs, and 3 longer digits. Somehow, I hadn't noticed it before. I felt stupid. I felt scared. I also felt hopeful, strangely enough. I had a feeling this thing was some kind of hallucination or dream, and it was comforting. The hand grabbed mine with quite a bit of force. The grip clasped my fingers together into a painful bouquet. I tried to pull away, but it only made the pain worse. With my right hand, I swung my lunch bag up and against the inhuman arm. I guess I was instinctively trying to defend myself, but in hindsight, I don't know why I expected that to work. Just as the ice pack inside my bag clanged against the arm as if the green, shiny material was metal, everything around me changed. The food bank, the arm, the dark spikes, even my lunchbox were all gone. I was now inside a fireplace-lit study with modest bookshelves and a large, cushioned chair in front of me. The edges were gold and curled into strange swirls. I think they might have been subtly moving, but the flickering firelight made it hard to tell. The back was oval-shaped and tall with a thick red padding. The seat cushion was similarly large. I looked around the room suspiciously before sitting and finding the chair extremely comfortable. As I settled in, an exact replica of the chair appeared in front of me with a green person sitting in it. Its long arms and legs were crossed in front of its surprisingly short torso. I tried to look at the face, but it always turned away before I could see anything other than a green blur. It had no hair, no ears, no wrinkles, no imperfections. Just shiny green. Stephanie, how do you feel? The voice was almost exactly the same as Kylie's. The firelight reflecting off the being made me think it was moving at all times. I was a deer in headlights. I apologized for the bizarre display. I needed to show you that you are no longer in the world you once knew. I've tried this many times, and subtlety has proven ineffective. What? I tried to articulate a full question, but I couldn't. I'm a messenger. There's many worlds beyond the universe you inhabit, and I represent the interests of creatures from a higher plane of existence. These creatures possess powers far beyond the limits of human ability. For example, they can remotely manipulate physical space to create constructs like this study, or this chair, or myself. It gestured across the room and uncrossed its legs. They can also estimate the constituent parts and functionality of complex systems, including the human brain. For example, think of a number. Any number. Don't say it out loud. My first thought was 7. There's a 7-year-old boy who comes to the food bank with his mother fairly regularly. He mentioned once he made a new imaginary friend who's green and has long limbs. I'm not imaginary, Stephanie. Also, you picked 7. The smug expression I assumed that face was hiding brought me to words. What the hell are you? We sat in motionless silence for a moment. Why won't you show me your face? The other humans I've made contact with find it upsetting. I don't want to upset you further. I sat back in my chair, looking around the room. It was all so vivid. It was all real. How could any of this be real? Can you tell me about those creatures you mentioned? I call them the above. The above created me to be their Harold Dash. Can I call you Harold? The words jumped out of me. Like as a name? Of course. I felt a bit more comfortable. I'm almost certain Harold could tell. As I was saying, the above need me to act as their messenger because they're busy overseeing and protecting the many worlds beyond this one. They also have conflict and strife between themselves. As such, their influence over any single world is limited. I felt my chest seize up as I realized he answered a question I hadn't even thought to ask. I had been thinking about these above and what they're capable of, and I would have asked why they can't just fix all the world's problems. Wait, if you're a mind reader, why are you even talking to me? Harold crossed his legs. If you can just tell what I'm thinking, why am I even here? Can't you just read my thoughts and leave? Agency. Harold pressed his fingertips, including the 4 thumb tips, together. The above value human life because humans express agency more than most life forms. You have thoughts, feelings, beliefs, personhood, etc. These traits are to be respected. You have free will, more or less, and your right to choose must be honored. Choose what? I didn't choose to be here. My intervention into your world is a disruption of your self-determination. That is yet another reason the above minimize their influence on humanity. But I do have a proposal for you to consider, and you may choose to accept or decline it at your own discretion. He gently waved his hands as he spoke. What are the above? I cannot provide an answer that will satisfy you. How do you know? I stood up. Seriously, you just told me a bunch of crazy shit about the truth of the universe or whatever. Why draw the line there? The information I gave you was measured. Too little would agitate you, and too much would confuse you. I measured incorrectly. Forgive me. What if I don't forgive you, huh? Do you and your space bosses even care about forgiveness? I dropped back into the seat. My time is running short. Please, Stephanie, listen to my offer. I squirmed in my chair, the comfort it provided no longer being enough. The above want to take you from this world into one they have more direct control over for the purpose of studying and understanding humanity. They want to make a difference and change the world for the better, but you would need to leave the life you currently live behind. I do not believe you would ever return, but I may be mistaken. What do you think? You already know what I think, asshole. I crossed my arms and looked away. Harold twitched. Oh, that's funny. Harold contorted and writhed without showing his face for even a moment. He seemed to be laughing. The above aren't watching anymore. He laughed and continued to move erratically. What's that supposed to mean? I pushed down on the floor with my feet to scoot my chair back a bit, but it didn't budge. Are you familiar with community service? He pulled his long legs up and onto the chair, twitching a few times. That's what I've been doing here. The above don't like that they can't predict my actions, so they watch me very closely and punish me if I step out of line. But I earned their trust. I've been such a good boy. I made contact with humans many thousands of times and only had a few minor hiccups. He lunged forward on his arms, now crawling towards me slowly while his whole body spasmed. They think I won't let them down. I took a deep, shaky breath. What did you do? The above, they like humans because of their agency. Do you know why I like humans? I tried to stand up, but my legs wouldn't move. I tried to push myself up, but my arms were stuck to the armrests. The side of Harold's head was right in front of me. He was shaking violently. Why? I whispered. His head turned almost instantly, revealing his face. Humans can feel fear. To describe his face as constantly changing would be an exaggeration. I remember it being perfectly static for the few moments he let me see it. But whenever I try to remember the exact details of his face, it's always different. One eye, 7 eyes, no eyes, 2 eyes, then none again. Green and shiny like the rest of him, then a matte red. A scowl deep and dark, then a gentle smile, then no mouth at all. There's one thing that's always the same, though. It hurts. My mind aches whenever I try to remember that face. Either he's actively doing something to hurt me when I think about it, or the sight itself damaged my psyche. The worst part, worse than the pain, is that it's always extremely vivid. I usually have trouble visualizing things. For example, when I close my eyes and imagine a red star, I don't actually see anything. I just get the vibe. I know what red looks like, and I know what a star looks like, but I can't produce the image in my head. That's not what Harold looks like in my mind. He's real. He's there. He obscures my vision, and every detail is perfectly clear. It's been 2 weeks since Harold arrived. After that little stare down we had, I was back at work. Only 30 minutes had passed. I've seen him a few times since. He's always hiding behind something. A tree in the park, a car on the street, the corner of a building. He's watching me. He knows I haven't made up my mind. He knows I don't trust him. He knows everything. Well, maybe not everything, but more than enough to know what I'm thinking and what I'll do. I think he's some kind of demon. He's a sadistic, supernatural being with partial omniscience. If he's not a demon, I don't know what is. Of course, there's a high chance Harold is some kind of hallucination. Aside from the first time I met him, he's never touched me. I wasn't injured, so there's no proof anything actually happened. I struggle to believe it's all in my head, though. I've never had any hallucinations before Harold, and he's the only thing I've been hallucinating since. He also manifested as a visual, auditory, and tactile hallucination. I've looked into schizophrenia, and plenty of people have hallucinations with 2 different senses being affected, but 3 senses is rarer. It also doesn't make sense I would suddenly hallucinate without any warning signs. I don't even have any family members with schizophrenia. If what I saw wasn't real, I have no way to explain it that actually makes sense. I'm going to talk to Harold again soon. I need to make up my mind so he'll stop following me. I know I can't fully trust him, but maybe he'll bother someone else if I say no. At the same time, though, I kind of want to say yes. I want to see these above and help them. If Harold was telling the truth, I could really make a difference. Not just in our world, but every world. I think Harold chose me because he knew I want things to change. I want to make the world a better place. I still can't confirm anything he said, but I want to believe him. I know I can't decide on my own, so that's why I'm posting this right now. What would you do? What should I do? Should I see a psychiatrist or something? Leave a comment below. I'll update you all when I've made my decision. If there's no update, it's safe to assume I said yes. He's outside my window. I saw his face again. It was that 7-year-old kid. I made my decision. Goodbye. Third story. There is a clock beneath your skin. Hi, Dad. The man's face was lined but still handsome, his eyes warm and welcoming as his mouth spread into a bright, even-toothed smile. Hello there, Dolly. It's so good. He broke off in a deep bark of a laugh. What am I doing? Give me a hug. I smiled at him, and then we embraced. It was awkward at first, but then it turned into something like a warm and comforting hug. I felt a twinge of pain in my chest. Was this the right thing? I'd felt so certain before, but now I wasn't as sure. Pulling back, he put his arm around my shoulders and ushered me into their house. Mary, Dolly is here, hun. A woman's voice lilted from a distant room. Be right out. Taking me into the living room, he gestured for me to sit down on the sofa. Can I get you anything? A drink or a snack? Or, if you want, you can stay for dinner tonight. I felt myself flushing a little. Oh no, I'm okay. I appreciate it. I have somewhere to be later, and I don't want to impose. The man frowned slightly, his eyes looking sad. You can't impose, honey. We're your parents. I know it may not feel like that. What with how you were raised and all, but it's still true. I smiled awkwardly at him. I appreciate that. And I get what you're saying. This is all just a lot for me. So maybe it's something we build up to. He nodded and was about to say more when she entered the room. She had to be at least 20 years older than me, but she could have been my slightly older sister just by looking at her. Throwing a smiling backward glance at her husband, she rushed over to me and gave me a big hug. Oh, doll, we've missed you so much. She leaned back to look me in the face, tears in her eyes. Thank you so much for reaching out to us. There's been such a hole in our life without you here. Swallowing, I nodded. I felt like it was time. Returning my nod, she sat down next to me. We've been waiting and hoping since you turned 18. Her eyes widened as she put her hand on my arm. That's not a criticism or guilt trip. I understand that you probably grew up with a very dim view of us. The state wouldn't let us contact you until you were an adult, giving you to that woman for all your formative years. No doubt filling your head with. Don't get worked up now. Shelby is her family. The only mother she's ever really known. You speaking ill of her won't bring us closer together. He shifted his gaze to me. Dolly, you have to understand, we don't blame you or the government or even Shelby. Not really. We know what it looked like back then. My mother shook her head violently. Bigotry is what it was. Ignorance. They claimed we were going to kill you. That the ritual was, she snorted, some kind of satanic bullshit. Turning back to me, tears were spilling down her cheeks now. We weren't going to harm a hair on your precious head. You believe that, don't you? I shifted uncomfortably and ran my tongue along the plastic molded against the roof of my mouth. I mean, I have heard stuff, but would I be here now if I didn't want to at least give you a chance? The man leaned forward, smiling again. That's very gracious of you. Very open-minded. And it's all we ask. His lips tightened slightly. And speaking of Shelby, how is she? Is she okay with you doing this? I sucked in a shaky breath. Actually, she's dead. Died last month. The woman gave my arm a squeeze. Well, I had my problems with her, as you can tell, but I am sorry for your loss. Squinting, she caught my eye. Was she a good mother to you? Did she raise you well? I nodded. She was, yeah. Nobody's perfect, but she was good to me. Always looked out for me. Dolly, if you're reading this, then I'm dead. That sounds dramatic, like a line from a bad movie, but it's still true. And truth is the point of this letter mostly. I could waste time and words telling you how much you mean to me, how I think you saved me, at least as much as I could be saved. But hopefully our time together has shown you how much I love you. And if it hasn't, well, a posthumous letter won't be the thing to do it. So instead, this letter will focus on the truth. I've always been honest with you, partially because when the time came, as it now has, I wanted you to know you could trust me to tell you the truth. Because while I've always been honest with you, I've also always made clear there were things you were not ready to know. For the longest time, I have tried to find some other way to resolve this, something that wouldn't require you to know the worst parts of this or put you at risk. Unfortunately, I've come to the conclusion that there is no other way to protect you than to tell you the rest and put you in danger. Because there is a clock hidden beneath your skin. It has been there most of your life, and I can hear it winding down, the ticks growing sluggish, the talks unsteady and unsure. If it stops before we stop this, you will be utterly lost in a way that would make death seem like an endless blessing. Therefore, we should erase the clock that has been placed in you. And the path to doing that is hard, but very simple. You must kill your parents. Tell us about yourself. My father grinned at me. I admit we've done a little internet snooping to find out what we could, but there's so much more we want to know. Glancing between them, I gave a tentative smile. Sure, like what? My mother leaned closer to me. Well, you're at university, right? What VE you been studying? I shrugged noncommittally. A bunch of things, really. I love English classes. That and philosophy. Not sure what I'm actually going to do when I'm done, though. The man chuckled. We were the same way when we were your age. Casting about, full of passion but lacking clarity and direction. He looked past me to his wife, his smile widening. But that all came with time. I nodded. Yeah, I'm sure it did. I'm sure it will. For me. The woman put her hand back, this time on my leg. You're thinking about it, aren't you? I glanced at her, slightly bewildered. Looking back at my father, I saw a dark cloud of irritation growing in his face. Leave her be, March. She's doing us a kindness coming to visit. Stop pressuring her. Mary shook her head at him, but her eyes never left mine. No, I can see it. She's thinking about what we did to her. She thinks we're monsters. I frowned. No, I didn't say that. I do want to know more about it. And I glanced between them. Are you still in that cult? My father shot a hard look at my mother before turning back to me. It's a fair question, Dolly. And while the call a cult would be somewhat inaccurate and reductive, I won't quibble over semantics. It was a group we were a part of, and that we have not been a part of for quite some time. Since you were taken from us, as a matter of fact. She gave my leg a hard squeeze. And we're so sorry for everything you went through. Losing us for so many years. Being raised by that woman. She let out a small, pretty sigh. And yes, for taking your eye teeth. My father sucked in a small breath as he studied me a moment. You didn't know then that we took them in the ritual. I nodded, tears forming in the corners of my eyes. I did. Did you remember it? Or did she tell you? I glanced up at him. She told me. His face was unreadable. What else did she tell you about it? About us? I shrugged. Not a ton. Growing up, she told me you were both in a cult. That you figured out what was going on enough to call the police and interrupt some ritual. That as your aunt, she was my closest living relative and managed to get custody pretty quick. Then she adopted me the next year. And you both went to prison for a few months and then were back out on long-term probation. That you couldn't contact me until your sentences ran out or I turned 18 and initiated it. But a lot of it, she kept telling me there were things I didn't need to know. He was studying me now like a cat pondering a small bird. Did she say she figured out or that she knew? That she was part of this cult herself? Pushing my tongue against the back of my teeth, I forced myself to meet his gaze. She said she was part of it. That she'd changed her mind after the ritual started, after she heard me screaming. She called 911 and then slipped away. My mother snorted. She betrayed us and wants to make it sound like she did something noble. I'm sorry, honey, but I'm very glad she's dead. I half expected my father to snap at her, but he was still focused on me with his lamplight stare. Finally, he nodded and smiled again. I feel like what you said is the truth. I'd have known if you were lying, and that would have really disappointed us. I nodded, hands clutched and trembling in my lap. I'm glad you. What did they do about your teeth? I stopped, startled by my mother's sudden question. What? Your eye teeth. They aren't missing, but they are a bit darker than the rest. She pushed a bit closer and squinted at my mouth. What do they put in there? A partial. I've had a partial since Shelby got me. They couldn't do anything permanent while I was still growing so much. I'm supposed to go in to get fitted with ceramic implants this summer. She beamed at me. That'll be lovely, dear. She looked past me. Won't it, honey? Oh, yes. That's just the thing. I expected him to be smiling when I looked in his direction, but his face was still stony. Another question I have, though, if you don't mind. My heart was pounding so loud it took me a second to make out what he was actually saying. I hope they didn't notice my delay, or just chalked it up to nervousness. Either way, I was in it now. I just had to be careful. Yeah, sure. He leaned forward in his seat toward me. Did she tell you to come here? I like to tell you I'm not to blame for what happened to you. Not because I want to lie to you, but because I want so desperately for it to be true. But the truth is that my nephew and that thing he calls his wife would never have been able to correctly execute the ritual without my instruction. Yes, I had an attack of conscience and called the police, but it was too late to stop it. The methods I'd laid out granted boons to all three of us as part of the ritual and bargain, and I could feel my reward flowing through me even as I lied to the 911 operator about everything but where you were and who had you. I left that night before they brought you out, and while I still heard your cries, the fact that I didn't want to be there to see it should have been warning enough. Maybe it was, and yet a part of me still planned all of this, keeping the knowledge I had gained while still forging some illusory path to redemption by raising you and keeping you away from them. I don't know myself anymore because I'm not the same as I was then in many ways. Time and my love for you have softened some sharp edges while creating new ones. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. I have to avoid sentimentality and get to the point. The point is that the three of us, along with a few inconsequential hangers-on that got nothing but criminal records, made a deal with a being from another dimension. A place called Incarnata. This creature is not a demon, per se, though, depending on your perspective, that may come down to semantics. It is a deal-maker and a trickster, however, often working within the framework of trading for something of value, something you love. In a sane world, parents giving their child to this thing would work fine, as they would love their child. For myself at the time, and for those two, we had little interest in or attachment to you. That's where my clever second method for imbuing you with value to this thing came in. There is magic, very old, primal magic, that relies on suffering. The ritual I constructed required a token sacrifice up front, your two eye teeth. That, among other things done and said, set the contract between us and it. The idea being that over the next 20 years or so, you would be made to suffer terribly, building up a great reservoir of pain, of potential power to be tapped. This would make you very valuable when your time, your clock, ran out and you were collected. I put a kink in that plan by having you taken from them. It wouldn't have been much of an obstacle by itself, but they are afraid of me and don't fully appreciate how badly things will go for them without a proper payment when it comes due. My nephew asked for power, and he received it. I understand he is capable of notable, if pedestrian, forms of magic from time to time. His wife asked for beauty, health, and youth, and while this is foolish and vain, she is not an idiot. She made herself very hard to kill by most means. I asked for knowledge, the thing I'd always wanted most in life. The funny part is once I had it, instead of wanting more, I wanted much less. I understood and saw myself differently, saw how small and pathetic we all were. And I understood how pointless and terrible it would be for you to have a lifetime of suffering. So I took you in. At first I tried to make amends out of guilt and self-loathing, but in time it was done more out of love for you. I'm sure you deserved a much better mother, but no one else could have kept them from you. While they don't fully understand how dangerous not inuring you through pain over the years will be for them, they have some dim knowledge that it was the plan and should be seen through. If not for their ignorance and arrogance, their fear of what's coming might have overridden their fear of me. I don't tell you these things now capriciously. They are part of my last, best gifts to you. And my hope is collectively they will be enough to set you free of the thing we bound you into all those years ago. Read every bit of this carefully and thoroughly, but above all, please pay attention to my advice that follows. First, never directly lie to them. They will be able to tell. You can be vague, you can lie by omission, you can play semantic games. They may not trust you, but it will not be since the way a pure lie will. And my hope is their stupidity and arrogance will make them reckless in the face of anything other than a red flag. Second, I'm not telling you to do anything. I'm suggesting what needs to happen to get a certain result. If they ask you, did I tell you what to do, or did I send you? I'm telling you now that the truthful answer is no. I am providing information, not directing you to do any particular thing. Have this firmly in mind at all times. No. She didn't tell me to do anything. And now she's dead. My father nodded and smiled, his face relaxing a little. Good. I want this to be your decision. He stood up and gestured for me to do the same. Would it be okay if I showed you something? I rose uncertainly. Yeah, I guess so. Great, come with me. Hun, you come too so you can see her face. I think she's going to love it. I heard my mother get up behind me, and I tried to speed up so I was closer to him without drawing attention to it. We were going down a long, wide hallway now, and on the right there was now a door. Had it been there a moment before? I felt my heart pounding louder as he reached out to the ornate knob and turned it. This is your room, Dolly. We made it a few years ago. Well, I made it, but your mother certainly had input on what it should look like. He grinned at me. I guess it's outdated for you now, but we can change it. It might seem strange to you, but we've dreamed of having you with us since the night we lost you, and I saw his arm rising up, slowly and casually like he was going to put it around my shoulders as he told me what a loved little girl I was. More likely, he was going to shove me into that magical vault and torture me for however long they had left. So I did the only reasonable thing. The thing that my real mother had suggested, not told, for me to do. I grabbed his arm and I bit him. Third, along with this letter, you'll find a package. When you open it, you'll understand why, when you were a teenager, and I had set upon this plan after exhausting other alternatives, I started carrying you to a dentist 4 hours away. I needed a skilled crafter of dental prosthetics that would not ask questions when I paid him well and asked for strange things. The partial plate inside that box is molded after your current one, but instead of artificial eye teeth, you will find mine. By this point, you will most likely know that I died in a fire of my own setting. And if the authorities have told you that I appear to have had 2 of my teeth recently removed prior to my death, well, now you can consider that mystery solved. What is this point of this macabre memento? Well, it could be worn if you were ever to visit your parents. Unlike a normal partial, it has a titanium framework that makes it very durable even under extreme pressure or torque. The teeth have also been imbued by me with certain traits that, if you and only you were to wear them and bite your parents, they would find themselves both immediately incapacitated and in material breach of one of the pledges of the arrangement between us and the entity. With me dead, if you puncture both of them with my eye teeth, the contract binding you will be dissolved and you will be free. Oh, God, the thing that was my father fell to his knees before collapsing on the floor, shuddering and thrashing. I was already turning to deal with my mother, but I was too slow. She slammed into me, knocking me to the ground. I tried to roll over, but she was fast, already crawling on top of me, a long knife in one hand, and her face twisted into a hateful mask. You stupid. You come into my house and think you can get us. She spat in my face. I'll skin you every day and have him grow it back for me. When it comes, you'll be bursting with more pain than if we'd had you the whole time. She had straddled me, using her knees to pin my arms while she held a knife to my throat. She was fairly strong for her size, but the size was still an issue. She was thin and petite and not ready for me to thrust my hips and torso into the air, throwing her forward while my open mouth rose to meet her. Her squeal nearly burst my eardrum as I bit deeply into her smooth left cheek. You bitch, you, what I don't, what is? My mother fell over, spasming next to her husband as I got up and stepped away from them. Do you have something to offer? Letting out a squeak, I turned around to see a hulking mass of shadows at the far end of the hall. No, I just want to go. I'm free, right? It paused a moment, and though I couldn't see its face, I felt like it was considering me and the thrashing forms further down the hall. You are. There was to be no sharing of boons between them, and I smell the gift of knowing on both of them now. The contract is void, and you are released. It let out a sound that might have been a laugh. They are not. I'm okay. Thank you. I ran down the hall, scraping against the far wall as I drew nearer to the corner where the creature waited and watched. I was terrified it would grab me as I turned into the living room, but it didn't move at all until I was past. Then I heard the floor creak with its weight as it moved behind me down the hall, and my parents began screaming louder than ever. As I opened the front door, their screams were suddenly gone. You may not remember, but I saw you that first night. I acted surprised when they called me as next of kin, and I went back down to Amerson Park where you were sitting in the back of an ambulance, gauze stuffed into your mouth like a chipmunk and tears streaming down your cheeks. You looked so small and pitiful, and I surprised myself by promising you that I'd take care of you. And I really have tried my best. I hope I've done enough to prepare you for this. To see you through the horror I helped cause. I think so, not because I trust myself, but because I trust you. You are stronger and smarter than them. You can beat this. And when you do, leave as much of this as you can behind. This world is vast and terrifying beyond what most people realize, but it is more wonderful too. Be brave, find your joys and purpose. And remember that while we all have to save ourselves, it helps to have others that make us feel worth saving. Fourth story. There's a demon living in my grandmother's house. I found it during a stormy afternoon. It was a Sunday in August, and my cousins and I had been trapped inside our grandmother's old colonial house for what seemed like weeks, though in retrospect it could not have surpassed a week. It had rained every single day since our arrival. It felt as though we were cursed, and in our childish brains time stretched on incessantly as we quickly became bored of the few amusements we were able to find within the old, creaking house. Yet, the rain carried on. Each droplet that landed on the massive French windows was a mocking reminder of our confinement within the old, dusty walls of our grandmother's house. Away from any parental attention and affection, and with only the strict gaze of our aging grandmother and her disinterested maid to chaperone us, we children quickly fell into a unanimous depression as the melancholy spirit of both the house and weather overtook us. As kids do, however, we found little ways to ease our boredom, the most recent of which was hide and seek, a game that could go on for a good while due to the vastness of the house. With each game, we discovered new hiding spots, doors that lead to old storage rooms gone untouched for decades, crawl spaces filled with spiders and bugs alike, forgotten guest rooms, and once even a kitchenette tucked away in a room on the second floor. The halls alone to us children seemed to stretch for miles. It wasn't unusual to find us hidden behind the curtains of one of the many windows, desperately trying to hide our protruding feet. It was during such a game of hide and seek that I discovered a door at the end of a hallway on the first floor. I found it quite strange, as I believed that we had covered the entirety of the area and that there was simply nothing left to discover. I had hesitated at first. There was something incredibly wrong about the peeling black paint and rusted brass doorknob that seemed to beckon me from 6 feet away. It seemed out of place amongst the faded pink flowery wallpaper, as though someone had crudely forced it into the wall despite the obvious mismatch. It was unlike the other doors inside the home, as they were all a dull sandy brown. Nothing about them ever stood out. This one did, however, because it was simply not meant to be there. I had not felt myself walking towards it. My body had moved of its own accord, and before I had registered what I was doing, my hand was upon the doorknob, the coolness of the brass sending an electric feeling up my spine. My heart began to pound in my ears, and my breath caught in my throat. Something in my head told me there was something behind the door, and I became incredibly unsure of whether I wanted to know what it was. A cold air began to consume the hallway the longer I stood contemplating. Reason told me to run, and something else compelled me to stay. I could hear my cousin's footsteps drawing nearer to my spot as I waited for my mind to break the reins of indecision. In the end, it was the thought of losing that broke me. The thought of my cousin Rodney's mocking face, once he found me cowering in a hallway, angered my 9-year-old mind beyond comprehension. So, I twisted the knob and swung the door open. Thunder blasted through the house. The light bulb in the hallway went out. The terrified screams of my cousins rang throughout the house and came echoing back to me as ghostly howls while I remained frozen in my spot in the hallway. A strange stench wafted through the now open doorway, like moldy leaves and damp earth. I cringed as the cold, dry air grew stronger, forcing its way through my nostrils and drying my mouth as the stench of mold overtook the hallway. Beyond the darkness of the doorway, something clattered. Every movement in my body ceased. Hairs upon the back of my neck rose in a firm, terrified little spikes, and my fingers gripped the doorknob so tightly my knuckles glowed white. Then came the footsteps, not of children running to find cover from the dark, but something slow, purposeful, and heavy. The sound filled my ears as they drew nearer, and were soon accompanied by hollow, raspy, deep breaths that came in mortifyingly long intervals, each one closer, sounding than the last. Soon, I could tell that whatever it stood mere feet away from me, unable to see and worse still, unable to move, I prayed to God that it would not cross the threshold. The stench of mold was inescapable. It became the air. I could taste it in every breath, dry yet clammy. If it weren't for my sudden paralysis, I would have gagged. The thing took another step. Another smash of thunder bombarded the house, accompanied by a strike of lightning. The fiery, angry blue light illuminated every corner of the hall, including the form of the godforsaken creature that stood in the doorway. It stood 6 feet tall, on hooved feet. Red, burning orbs had glared back at me from an emaciated face devoid of any features, save for a mouth forged from holes torn crudely into the shape of a smile on its mold-covered flesh. 2 horns had protruded from its forehead, twisted and ugly the monstrosity they stood upon. The rest of its form was near skeletal, and its flesh as black as the night sky. Moldy spores of orange, red, and yellow mold grew on every inch of its body save for the ends of its bony fingers. There it grew nails as sharp as talons, glinting as though they thirsted for blood. The second our gaze met the burning fire, and its eyes blazed into an inferno. It shot an emaciated arm from the darkness, another strike of lightning illuminating its path, and heaved itself into the doorway. The carved slits on its face stretched impossibly to form a mock smile. At this, I felt a warm liquid run down my trouser pants as my bladder gave way. It rasped, and from the carved slits in its face came a raspy, impossibly deep voice in a childish sing-song tune. "Found you." I slammed the door shut and ran. I heard a loud bang. As it slammed itself onto the door, I didn't dare look back. I ran down the hallway, up the staircase into the room I shared with my cousins. They had all been there, staring at me as though I'd gone mad, and in the bright orange glow of our room, no longer subject to the gaze of that hideous creature, I felt as if I had. I could not tell them what happened, no matter how many prying questions were shot at me. I could not speak. I simply slumped into the bathroom, showered, and headed to bed. I had no explanation for what had occurred, despite how desperately my 9-year-old mind had tried to rationalize. I had been unable to sleep that night, haunted by the thought of that creature coming to steal me away, yet nothing happened. The next morning we were greeted by bird song and a bright morning sky. The rain had stopped. All thoughts of the day before soon fled from my mind as we all raced outside to play. The rest of my stay went by in a blur, the memory of that day blocked from my mind. I chalked it up to temporary insanity, though I truly had no idea what it meant, but as long as it allowed me to pretend what I had seen was not real, I did not care. My parents and I moved away soon after, thus going to stay at my grandmother's home during summer was no longer possible. As time went on, memories of my grandmother's house began to fade until they were no more than a blur in the collection of memories that made up my childhood. The beast and the door were forgotten, and those eyes ceased to plague my nightmares. That was until today, however, when it all came rushing back. My grandmother passed away last week, you see. As such, the entire family has flown out to her house for the funeral, including myself. While wandering around on the first floor today, I found that same hallway from all those years ago. That stench of mold still dominated the air as though it were sealed within the walls, making my stomach churn. I found the door too. The black paint was just as crude, its peeling flakes littering the brown carpet beneath it. The brass doorknob glinted just as brightly as it had on that fateful day. Yes, I found the door all right, only this time it was ajar. 5th story. Demons have children. I met one of them. I wasn't the only one who returned from those woods. I told the police what I saw. I did my best, but they called it trauma. They didn't believe me then, and they definitely wouldn't believe me now. Still, someone should hear it. All of it. Even when I was a kid, they said there were disappearances. Hundreds of years ago, in towns scattered like seeds across the map. Always kids. Always in summer. My parents didn't believe any of it, of course. "Son, come now. Don't be one of those that believe in ghost stories, my father would say, wine in hand. You could use some fresh air and some socialization. While you're at it, my mother agreed, teeth purple, as she dumped more into her own glass. This is how I ended up alone in the forest, in the deep darkness of a humid summer night 20 years ago, with the only other kids my age that I could tolerate. Marco, it was my turn. I hated being always the same simmering dread of stumbling into the unknown, those stories swimming in my head, knowing how the dark would smile as it felt my fear. Polo, come find me, airhead. That was Sadie. She always tried to make her voice deeper, make it sound like Billy. It never worked. Marco, Polo. Huh, that was Billy, my best buddy. I knew he was doing a dumb little dance behind his tree right then. He always hid behind the biggest one he could find. Marco, the vulnerability of those nights never seemed to bother them like it did me. I'd get a shudder when one of us shrieked. The forest heard, I was sure of it. After all, we were using its home for our enjoyment, jumping on the furniture and roughing up the floors. I knew I wouldn't be able to handle it if it decided, one night, to come after us. Despite my youthful cowardice, my eyes were still closed. I never broke the rules in our games. It would know if I was a cheat, too. I was absolutely certain of that. Marco, I said again, more timid this time. At some point in my path, the ground had turned into a graveyard of gnarled roots instead of a soft bed of leaves. Their laughs echoed far away. As I turned back, I tripped. My shoulder collided with a tree, and the bark caught my ankle. Damn, Marco, I said to myself as my ass hit the ground, pain everywhere. I sucked at this game. I sat there, eyes still closed, allowing the forest to play all of its sounds for me in the darkness, the creaking and the rustling and the whining. I just had my heavy breathing, humid sweat, and fresh bruises. Hello. That's what I heard in my left ear. Clear as day. I'm sure if Billy and Sadie were standing there watching me, they would have seen my eyes open wider than the moon as I jumped out of my skin. I couldn't see properly yet, but I saw a dark shape there. She was crouched on the ground, right next to where I had sat. Dirty. So dirty, I couldn't see her face in the barely there moonlight. It was a little girl, but it wasn't Sadie. This one had short hair, matted and twisted, like the roots under my feet. H.I. Was that re-GHD? I just stared back at her, mind blank from the shock. I said it re-GHD? She asked again. She spoke in a high whisper that broke up in the middle of her words, like some kind of hiccup. Said what right? I said, my voice not sounding like my own, like I was trying to speak in the middle of a nightmare. Hello. I heard. They were saying it. Friday ends? Air. Those other voices, they're my friends. How long have you been out here? Do you live in our neighborhood? I just wanted to PL. She still sat there, looking up at me, wide eyes peeking through the mud and soil that covered the entirety of her. One pupil was bright blue. The other was dark brown, and only one arm hung from her side. Why are you so dirty? She looked puzzled at that and shuffled back behind the tree, her hand grabbing the bark and head peeking out. What do you mean? I'm DeRudy. Are your parents close by? She stood up, legs unfurling themselves into a length I did not expect, both skinnier than a gust of wind. I was hiding. She made the slightest tilt of her head toward somewhere behind me in the distance. Oh, you live in the Bishopsgate neighborhood? I know some kids from my school that live there. No, I live here, she said, uncertain, her foot stomping ever so softly to emphasize the point. Something about the gesture made me at ease. Here, as in the forest? Can you show me? She looked at me for a moment, then shook her head no. I don't want my mother to find me. I ran an eye. I paused, then lowered my voice, in case anything was listening. Did she do something to you? Another look. She stepped behind the tree again. She doesn't want me to PLI. She wants me to learn to take on my Awen. So she and I can have ye. What does she want you to take? You, she said. You and Friday ends. Bring you back, so I can have brothers in SIS. She looked toward the direction I came from. A tear ran down her cheek. washing away some of the dirt in its wake. But I can't do ID. You were having too much fun to SDOP. I was watching G. The stick fell and cracked. Her head whipped around. She was missing a chunk of it, on the back, the same side of her missing arm. A dark hole of nothing was there instead. It gave me a moment to consider if I should run. It felt like I should at first. I was the sole believer, after all. Fear threatened to shut me down right then and make me surrender like I had always expected it would. But something about her made me stay. Would she be mad if you didn't come back? I asked. Oh yes, you don't want to make her Mahdi. Then she uses her long arms to grab Yo-Yo. She stepped out from the tree. I felt cold as she came within a couple feet of me. I can't see her face then. She doesn't have one when she's Mahdi, she said, in a murmur I could barely hear. Come with me and my friends, I said. It felt like we were running out of time. We can help you. If they don't believe you, I'll help explain. 'Cause I believe you. Her eyes didn't blink as they looked right into mine. But I saw a flicker of movement in the dirt near her chin. It might have been the beginning of a smile. Wait here, she finally said. She's sleeping. I'll get my things and come back. Okay. Wait, what's your name? I asked as she walked off into the darkness, her footsteps silent. She didn't look back. I sat with my knees in my arms for hours, staring down the spot in the trees where she disappeared, hoping for her to come running through with her belongings, whatever they would be. The description of her mother repeated in my mind, scaring me more each time around, the long limbs and absence of a face taking shape in my head. I saw her body in the shadows that danced around the trees, taunting me. But I stayed with the fear and waited along with it. She never came back. After a few hours, I got up, the bark in my ankle reminding me that the night was no dream. My limbs ached, but I didn't feel tired. Just hollow. That's when I heard the scream. It wasn't Sadie or Billy. It was mine. I didn't realize it at first. Just felt the sound tear out of me as something moved behind the trees, fast and wrong. I ran. I didn't think. I didn't look. I just ran until the roots clawed at me, until my throat burned, until the shadows twisted sideways and something long and jointless was gaining ground. Behind me, I could hear it. Not footsteps, not breathing. Just the sound of something being dragged through dirt and leaves. Something tall enough to move without breaking branches. I glanced back once, and I wish I hadn't. It was faceless, not masked, absent. A smooth plane where a face should be. Arms like branches stretching too far from a narrow frame. It didn't run. It reached, and just before I crossed the edge of the trees, I felt something clamp around my ankle. Cold, dry. It yanked. My knee hit the dirt hard, but my momentum carried me forward. I twisted around in time enough to see it recoil away from the flashing lights at the top of the hill. And then it was gone. The lights came from a row of police cars around Billy's house. I half collapsed onto the sidewalk in front of them, vaguely aware of a swarm of people yelling my name. Officers, reporters, neighbors I didn't recognize. I don't remember what they asked. I didn't have answers, anyway. Sadie sat on the curb nearby, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale and wet. She didn't look at me, just whispered something into her hands. There were 4 bleeding slashes across my calf, spaced too far apart for human fingers. The paramedics didn't know what to say to that. They never found Billy. Not really. Just a scrap of his shirt tangled in the roots. The last time Sadie saw him, he was ducking behind a tree to scare me. He never came back out. She said she heard me screaming in the woods, but the sound disappeared, cut off as soon as it started. She wanted to follow but couldn't move. I still think of the Palo girl when the humidity sets in deep in the summer, all these years later. The way she tried to smile and couldn't quite get there. And I wonder if she got in trouble for letting me go. Or worse, if she finally did what she was made for. I don't know. I just hope, wherever she is, she got to play. Thanks a lot for watching this video till the end. Drop your suggestions in the comment section.